So I've wrote here the two things that I'll be talking about. So an int and an integer. So what are the difference? So an int is a primitive type. So the most basic concept within Java. So if I wanted to create a number 7, for instance, that's all I can do with it. So an int, let's say x equals 7. So what I've done here is just create a new variable with the value of 7, and that's essentially all it does. It's just that you're declaring a number of 7. An integer is slightly different. So it's not a primitive type of just creating a number. What I'm doing, because it's a class, what I'm doing now is creating an instance of the class. So if I do integer y equals 7, if I do a sysout of x and a sysout of y, when I run this, it will return back both values being 7. So what's the difference here is that because this is primitive and I've just created a value of 7, what I've done here is created an instance of the integer, and then I've not only just created the value of 7, because I've created an instance of the object, I'm now having access to all the different methods that are associated to this class. So now that I have this value of 7, I can do loads of things with it. So if I wanted to, I can just create this integer into a string value, for instance. Whereas for a primitive type, there are no methods that are associated to it. So it's a very basic concept. So within here, when I create an instance of the class integer, I now have access to loads of different functionalities that I can now do with 7. So that's the big difference there. Another difference is that, well, let's put that in practice actually before I continue. So let's say at the moment I don't know what it is. So integer y is null. And then let's say I have a string value number equals 9,000. So obviously you guys know that this 9,000 is a value, but in Java terms, because I've created it as a string, it's not actually an integer yet. It's actually a string value, just like with any other, 900A is a string value. 9,000A is a string value. 9,000 at the moment is actually a string value. What I'm doing here is declaring number as a string. So what I can do here, let's say I want to convert this string into an int value. So I can do y equals y dot parse int, and then pass the string value. So if I run that, this is now an integer value from a string. So this is something, this is achievable by using other methods with the primitive type, but this is just one of many processes that you can use to manipulate the data passing through this object instance. So that's the first example. The second example is that if I wanted to create a value, but I don't know what it is yet. So let's say I want to create a value, a number y, but I don't quite know what the actual value that I need to associate y to. Because in this example here, I've passed null into y. So if I do a, let's get rid of that. So when I've declared this value and then try and print out what the value is, it becomes null, which is fine. I can't do this with a primitive type. So if I do a x equals null, it's throwing a big wobble. It's basically saying that, hang on a minute, you're pushing in null, but I'm expecting an integer value. I can't just declare int x being an int, because what it's expecting is that when I create a primitive type, I need to initialize it. So I have to put a value associated to this integer. So that's the other benefit of, well, this is one benefit of using integer rather than int, is because if I create a variable, but I don't know what number it is, I can just pass in null. And this is the difference between null and 0 as well, is that one might say that that is very similar. So 0 is actually null, but in Java terms, that's not, well, in any programming terminology, that's not completely correct, because when I'm saying null, I'm just saying nothing. At the moment, it's just a blank value. But here, because it's an integer of 0, the number 0 is actually a value. So here I'm passing no value, here I'm passing a value. So that's the other difference of using the integer over int. So how about the benefit of using int over integer? Well, basically what this is, int, is actually a bite-sized version of integer. So integer just does have this functionality of having the primitive type within the class, but this is just a primitive type on its own. So if I just wanted to declare a value of 30, for instance, and then, let's say int xx equals, actually just do x equals x plus 40, for instance. If I just wanted to do that, just add a value to the existing value, I don't need to declare an instance of the class and then run all the methods associated to it. What it's doing here, so if I do a integer 30, basically what it's doing here is doing a is it parse int? Trying to think of the value. Integer value. So integer y 30. Let me just write this out and then talk about it. So in the newer versions of Java, basically what it's doing here is auto-boxing. So let me just write it. Boxing. What it's doing here is I'm passing the integer value 30 into this object instance, because this isn't an integer value, this is an object value. And what Java is saying is that, oh, you're giving me a integer value, let me just convert that into the object itself. So what it's doing here is actually running this method, the integer value. So this line here is very much exactly the same as the other line, as this line here as well. When I create an instance of y and then having to run the method to then convert that integer into the object value, that's a lot of hard work. I mean, when I say a lot of hard work, when I talk about the performance aspect of it, this is very much a lot simpler approach. So when we talk in performances, and we just want to do, we just want to handle the value of the integer, this is most definitely the way forward. Because of the performance side, that I just need to declare the value, where here I have to create an instance of the object and then run the method as well. So the reason why you'd use int is predominantly around performances. The reasons why I would use integer by creating an object instance is that I can handle null values, and that I can also have additional functionality to manipulate that value as well. So I hope that clarified the differentials, and I'd be interested to hear your comments. Okay, thanks.